You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
We'll call this meeting of the Branford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, October 23rd, 2025. I have 7 p.m. We'll start by introducing members of the commission and staff. Commission member Joe Chadwick. Joe, are you here?
Joe Chadwick is present.
Thank you, Joe. Commission member Fred Russo. Fred, are you here?
Fred Russo is present.
Commission member Joe Vayuso. Joe, are you here?
Are we recording?
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay, just check it. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
So thank you, Michelle. So the meetings, we just started the meeting. We haven't done anything substantive. We're introducing members. Joe Vayuso. Joe, are you here?
Joe Vayuso is here.
Thank you, Joe. Marcy Pelusi. Marcy, are you here?
Marcy Pelusi's here.
Sharon Hutner, are you here?
Sharon Hutner is here.
Thank you, Sharon. And our staff this evening is our town planner, McKeel Wackers. McKeel, you're here?
Here.
And our assistant planner, Dan Robinson. Dan, are you here?
Here.
Thanks, Dan. And our clerk recording secretary is Michelle Martin. And I'm Chuck Anders, chair. I'll start by asking our secretary to read the notice of public hearing.
Legal notice, Town of Branford. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Branford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of public hearings to be held on Thursday, October 23rd, 2025 at 7 p.m. by remote technology to consider the applications listed below. Information regarding how to participate in the public hearings will be provided on the Commission's meeting agenda that will be posted on the town's website at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. Application 25-8.3 Zoning Text Amendments, Sections 2.2, 6.8C, 9.6K, 9.6L. Mikhail Wackers, Director of Planning and Zoning applicant. Application 25-8.4 Zoning Regulation Application, Revisions to the Landscaping Regulations, Section 6.3. Mikhail Wackers, Director of Planning and Zoning applicant. Application number 25-9.4, special modification to the parking requirements allowed under section 6.5.1, in parentheses 1, located at 530-550 Main Street. Special exception modification to PZ number 10-5.4 to switch the location of required parking from 447 to 471 Main Street to 530 to 550 Main Street. Attorney James Perito, agent for applicant. 44-471 Main Street, LLC, 529-531 Main Street, LLC, 530-550 Main Street, LLC, owners. Application number 25-9.6, special exception for multifamily residence located at 67 Cedar Street, Tom Edwards, architect and applicant, John J. Pinzella, owner. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard. Copies are on file in the Planning and Zoning Commission's office at the Planning and Zoning Department, 1019 Main Street, Branford, Connecticut, 06405. Written communications may be sent to the above address or to planning and zoning at branford-ct.gov. Branford Planning and Zoning Commission, C. Andres, chairperson.
Chuck, you're muted.
Oops.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
Chuck Anders, chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
We'll follow our normal format for public hearings, which is the applicant goes first, makes his presentation, explains the proposal. After that, we turn it over to the commission and staff, typically hear a summary of a staff report, questions and comments from commission members. At that point, we open it up to the public, and I'll ask McKeel or Dan to explain the process for that. We ask that you state your name and address for the record, make your comments. After the public comment, we allow the applicant to respond to any of the public comment, and there may be additional questions and comments from the commission. We may or may not close the public hearing, depending on how it goes. I should note that on our agenda this evening, it's probably going to be a decent a length of time simply for items number 2 or 3, which are a series of zoning amendments that are in the process that have been proposed that we're going to be going through. And I know there's been some, particularly on the landscaping component, there's a lot of public comment on that. So what I'm saying is that if you're on later after that on the agenda, we're going to go through our agenda. You may want to, we'd love to have you listen to us, but you can tune out and check back in later because we are following the normal sequence of our agenda. And I believe McKeel posted a link to that in the chat if you want to see where things are. So with that, what we'll do is McKeel or Dan, can one of you just explain the process for public or applicant participation?
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. So quickly, if you wish to speak and you're using a computer with a microphone, click raise your hand in the participant window. If you're using a phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and we will call on you when we wish you to participate. The dial-in information is all listed on the agenda, so if you need the phone number, you can find it there. If you don't wish to speak, you may submit comments using the chat feature. We will monitor it the best we can, but speaking is preferred. And as the chair indicated, please state your name and your address. As a reminder, if you are only planning on viewing, you are not required to have your real name and with your window on the screen, but it is preferred that we know who attends. All right, Chair, that's the instructions.
Chuck and Chair, thank you, McKeel. With that, we'll turn to our first item, which is Teddy Store LLC, 165-195 Main Street. This is a special exception for an apartment over a convenience store at 165-195 Main Street. Is the applicant ready to proceed? Then
you can unmute yourself.
Okay, is that better?
We hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, this is just a follow-up from the meeting, I believe, last week. I attended water pollution a couple days ago, and they approved everything. So it's pretty much the same as what I was asking for about a week ago.
thank you. Any further comments from the applicant?
Nope, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll turn it over to staff. Any further comments from staff?
I will share my staff comments. So, because they have changed since the last meeting. So this applicant is to allow a special exception caretaker's quarters above an existing retail establishment. The upper stories were actually constructed in the 80s over a one-story building for offices for the retail use. The applicant has recently purchased the property and they're looking to use that for a residence as a caretaker's quarters. In reviewing the bulk requirements, it meets all the bulk requirements. With the exception of the impervious surface ratio, the lot has been used for automotive uses and retail establishment for well over 40 years, and the paving that exists today is essentially remained unchanged. So it's existing non-conforming impervious surface. Looking through the standards, the site does require 22 parking spaces based on the uses that are currently there, but the site only can accommodate 16, as was demonstrated in an application before planning and zoning a few years ago. But that is much more in compliance now with converting the office to residential. they are only non-conforming by one space with this change of use if it's approved. Because there's no construction, there's little that we're evaluating for determining if it's compliant. The site is existing non-conforming, but welcome to hear the Commission's comments on what might need to take a look at in addition. I pulled the site plan from the change of use for convenience store in the main building, just to show how the parking layout can be accommodated and how it came to the more compliant parking scenario that we are considering. Review by other departments, fire and building. Since this is going to be a change of use, they're going to need construction drawings in order to complete their review, but they'll do that if planning and zoning approves this, and the applicant will be required to pull a building permit. The town engineer has confirmed that the applicant did go to WPCA and they have approval for a change of use for the sewer connection. It does meet many of the special exception criteria, and that it is located in a zoned area that allows for more density, has existing facilities, infrastructure to support it. If we approve this, I put together a draft finding that the commission will find based on testimony and application materials that the proposed use of the property is consistent with the best special exception criteria. There are 3 conditions. The first is that they comply with all departmental comments. We have our traditional standard lighting requirements to ensure that all lighting is appropriately cut off and dark skies compliant. And then finally, since it is a residential, it functions very much like an accessory apartment, looking to incorporate our standard accessory apartment deed restrictions, where if it is enabled to be used as a caretaker's quarters for the property owner, that we allow it to be used as a affordable rental, eligible under 830G. It would help from a zoning enforcement standpoint, and and I think it's consistent with other policies that the commission has implemented on a number of different similar uses. With that, I will stop sharing and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, McKeel. Questions or comments for McKeel or the applicant by commission members? Hearing none, then let's open it up to the public. Do any members of the public wish to comment on this item? Do you see anyone, any member of the public wish to comment?
I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Are there any further comments from the applicant?
No, thank you very much for hearing me.
Are there any further comments from the commission members or staff? Hearing none, then I think we can close this matter as a public hearing and be able to bring this up later on in the meeting. Thank you. So with that, we'll turn to item number 2. And items number 2 and 3 are text amendments to the regulations. And in my understanding is actually item number 2, I believe there's 4 text amendments. And item number 3, there's 1. It's the landscaping one. And my general understanding here is that the McKeel wanted to get the ball rolling on these things, and coming in and to help make the process more efficient, has proposed these, but with the understanding that there may be significant public comment. And the thought was that this evening what we would do is have McKeel give a general overview, a sort of skeleton view of what this is about, get some comments both from commission members and the public, This is going to be on all the regulations, and we'll continue all of these to see where this goes. Nikhil, did I get that right? Did I?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay. So with that, why don't we start with the, again, number 2, which is a series of 4 text amendments. I don't know, we should probably do them individually, don't you think? Or what do you think, Nikhil and Dan?
Yeah, I think we can go through that. I'm happy to go through it individually, do a very quick summary. The intent here tonight is to really collect feedback from the public in this public hearing process. And based on that feedback, we'll see what, if anything, needs to be considered for possible revisions for any final consideration at maybe the next meeting. I foresee the next meeting might be a little much later on the later agenda. So I think that'll give us an opportunity to dig deeper into it with the commission, but I will share my screen very quickly. All right. Actually, I'll go through Dan, do you have your comments?
Yeah, I do.
Why don't you just share real quick, so on just the first page, so people can understand what zoning text amendments I'm going to speak to. The first one is just a change in the definitions to clarify building height. Currently, building height is established by every district by a set number of feet above grade. As Branford is coming to deal with climate change and to ensure that property owners can still maintain and protect and do appropriate steps with their properties. We want to ensure that they do not have any undue burdens in essentially protecting their property. So we're looking to not just have the average grade be the point where you start measuring height, but in some cases where there's flood zones in effect, using the flood elevation as the point where you start measuring height. This one we've had a number of different internal conversations among departments, and we are looking at possible changes in terms of not piggybacking what the district height requirement is, which could be 35 feet or 40 feet, depending on the district, but maybe setting some more a less stringent threshold and keep it to number of stories that we will allow above the flood elevation. But that will be, I'd be willing to hear comments from the public on that. So that's the summary of that. And Chair, do you want to open up to comments on that item?
Why don't we go ahead? It probably makes sense to do this to go sequentially. We'll start with comments from the commission. And I did, I'll go ahead and start the building height issue. I saw the town engineer's comment and I thought that was interesting, that this, a seemingly, change in definition could have a major impact in the sense that it could allow larger heights, an additional 5 to 10 feet. And my sense is that, and it's only in FEMA areas where you're talking about, basically FEMA or floodplain areas, but those are by the water. Those are where you have small lots. Those are where height makes a difference, where people, can complain that my views are being affected and so forth. So it's something that I had the sense that I'd like to get a better, sense of any public impact. I don't want to just sneak this in if we're going to do that. And I saw that the town engineer's comment, why not just have it a story limit? That kind of made some sense too. So I could see that because, I can see that's where, when people, there could be tear downs or whatever, and you could have something a lot higher than the neighbors or somebody's view gets obstructed. I'm curious, this isn't that new. This FEMA stuff has been going on for a while. And I'm also curious as to, how many variances have been sought because of this? Have there been FEMA-related variances, considered by our ZBA? And what do they do? Do they grant them? Do they deny them? I kind of, those are sort of the questions that I had in exploring that. So I'll stop and see, are there other commission members who have questions or comments about the proposed change in definition for building height?
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Fred.
I'd like to kind of piggyback on what you were saying about the heights. My recollections was that I was under the impression that height was originally determined because of fire equipment being able to get up to a particular height. I thought 35 was the limit. And I don't know what their equipment does. Maybe they can go 50 feet today. But I always thought that's why we had a limit of 35 feet. That was one concern, how the fire department would consider heights much higher, because especially those that are in a floodplain, because they might be elevated 10 or 12 feet to begin with. The other thing is, you mentioned about how many stories a building could be, but I'm thinking to myself, what is a story? Is it 8 foot? Is it 10 foot? Is it 12 foot? If I had a house that was facing Long Island Sound, I would want a very high ceiling with a lot of glass. So, that the store, just saying how many stories isn't enough. I would almost think that you might have to define what, there might be a range of what a story represents, but, someone could have a grand room that has a 14-foot ceiling and then two 10-footers above that. And, what happens is the house is, beside being elevated, and I'm not picking on houses on the water, I'm just going to be any house for that matter, but, a house that's already going to be elevated, plus without defining the height of a story, might make it very difficult. You're going to have different houses with the same number of stories, but different heights. So it was just something that crossed my mind as we were talking about the height of a house and the number of stories. Maybe the word story needs to be defined to within a certain limit too. And if someone wants to go more than that, then they would come, I guess, before the commission and ask for some kind of an exception. But that was just my thoughts about height and stories of buildings.
Chuck and Chair. Thanks, Fred.
Okay.
Good points. Other commission members have comments or questions? Sharon.
Sharon Hutner here. I agree with what you were saying, Chuck, about how this change in definition might affect the neighbors in various locales in town. And I walk along the water very often, and I've seen new construction with houses that have just seemed to me are too tall for the regulations, but obviously have been approved. So I would think that we could take a closer look at this. And I also agree with Fred. I don't understand what a story limit would mean and how that could be calculated. So I just think we need to take a closer look at this.
Thanks, Sharon. Other comments from anyone? Commission members?
I'll chime in on, it's Marcy. I'll chime in on the story example. Back in the 40s or 50s, room heights were 7'6". Joe can obviously attest to this. And over time, as rooms get bigger, there's a need to increase the floor height, and they could be anywhere from 11, 12 feet, or even if there's a cathedral ceiling higher, and it's a function of space around it. And I think that the same logic, whether you're talking about the interior feel of a room in proportion, has to apply to the exterior. And in these shore areas where you're in smaller lots that predated zoning, you've got this added impact of the flood restriction, which I certainly appreciate, but, compounding the height example, it's kind of increasing density without increasing, users necessarily. And, I just think that that's an important consideration in terms of the form and character of the town, in terms of the way a neighborhood feels. And, it's just, it's the same thing. I know I was reading ahead on some comments about a lot split, and, it's like every time you make a parcel smaller, if you put a bigger house on it, that changes the feel of a big parcel with, a 1,400 square foot cape. You're going to get a completely different proportion. And I think that's some contextual study needs to be applied. It's very hard to sort of blanket these things in one regulation, which, I know that's the nature of the regulations, but, I think that's the challenge that we're trying to find the happy medium with.
Thanks, Marcy. Other comments from commission members?
Yeah, I guess I might as well chip in on this. It's kind of a slippery slope to say we're going to just add the feet over the footage over the floodplain. There's an opportunity to get a very tall building. There's also the opportunity to get fairly wobbly buildings. They'll have to be certainly engineered to a much greater degree than they may already be engineered, just to resist overturning forces. The sort of other route that would be taken there is, well, maybe the lots are too small, so we're going to have to start aggregating a lot and building bigger houses to make up for that business. And we're in just sort of an area of almost backing into a form-based zoning that is going to be completely out of character. So personally, I'm not opposed to skinny tall houses. Yes, we need to have a definition of story height, or just simply a vertical height that's based on something rational and something that's derivable. There is a floor-to-floor problem. There is a roof structure problem. We could be forcing this into a situation where we have a bunch of flat roof buildings just to get the maximum number of stories within a certain limited height. So I don't know where the outfall from this is going to come. And I'm not sure that anything I have just said is any different than leaving the height where it is and not mitigating that for the flood elevation. So it's if we're going to make a change, we should be making a change with some study towards what we feel the character of the town is and how this might be driving the character of the town on the shorefront. We certainly don't want it to look like, someplace in New Jersey or Cape May, but we certainly have that potential to drive it in that direction.
Any comments?
Who is it directed to? You went out for a minute.
Oops. Do we lose Joe? Yeah, Joe. We were just making the rounds. Did you have any comments on this regulation? Whoops.
You hung up.
Oops, there you are.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
Okay. Well, all of you brought up all good points and all concerning points, but I guess you have to define the story and height and and a story could be like Fred said and Joe said. It can be 8 feet. It could go up to 10 or 12 or 13 feet. So, and Joe Chadwick mentioned a good point about height, the heights in these small little lots, and so I think we have to consider that. Consider a lot of the heights in these small lot areas, and he brought up a good point about a flat roof, just to get an extra floor in there. That can create another problem with snow load. So, to me, I think the height should be held to a reasonable height, and I know you have to start. The starting point is what I think you're trying to change and identify. And from that point on, I don't think we should try to raise the height because we're already going to be raising the height because the starting point is going to be different in most cases. So I think we have to really think long and hard because all the comments that were made were very well taken in my point of view. So, thank you.
The public, see if the public has any comments on this specific regulation. Does any member of the public wish to comment on the proposal to modify the definition of building height for those buildings in floodplains, I believe?
I actually do. I will enter them into chat to be more clear.
Okay, can you just identify yourself for the record, please?
I will with my chat.
Okay. It's yeah, then we got to remember to print it out and put it in the record. It's sometimes easier if because you're on the record if you actually see it, and people can't always see it otherwise. But that'll work.
I guess I was just so my hesitation was that I was afraid that I have too many parts to the question.
Okay.
So, but my name is Carla Iazzi. I'm with 16 Old Pawson Road in Branford, and I apologize because I missed the very beginning as to what exactly is being proposed and by whom. Is that like who's making the recommendation of the change?
Sure. The quick summary, and what you could always do is send an email because we're continuing the public hearing. If you want to do it, that may be easier. This is a proposed amendment to the definition of building height that would only for those buildings in floodplains, which are are water, that would basically measure the height from the floor level, the required floor level. Basically, it could potentially allow higher buildings in areas. You have to elevate buildings where the first floor is above the water line so it won't get flooded. And so that you sort of have to put them up. And the thought was, well, okay, that you're sort of penalized. And therefore, since you have to push them up anyway, should we measure the height from that point as opposed to the original grade of the land? So anyway, that was the issue, and it's because of FEMA stuff. So yeah.
Okay.
You can
so what is in terms of looking at other area coastal towns, what are they doing in similar situations? What is the recommendation of FEMA on coastal areas and the impact, when you're getting a surge of wind and water and now you have a larger building taking that's just going to get sheer force at it. And then what's the recommendation of the insurance industry would be my questions.
Thank you. Those are good questions. So
I will say that I will go on the record being a planner of over 20 years, almost 30 years, and working with FEMA and other disasters. I was strongly opposed to allowing it to be calculated based on your raised level. There is a reason for raising the level, and it's not punitive. It is a case of where you built your house and the environment. And I will go on the record as saying I strongly oppose the change.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And other members of the public, we see, I think we see a raised hand, a couple.
Well, I can't raise my hand because my system doesn't allow that. Steve Kujma. My comment on this would be, I think that it should be handled on a case-by-case basis because somebody that lives down near the water should be able to object to somebody building a house higher than them in front of them. That's all I have to say. So,
Chuck and share. Thank you, Mr. Kudra. Other members of the
there's
public?
two people with raised hands.
Okay, Mikhail, why don't you pick one?
Yeah, Tracy Everson.
Thank you. Tracy Everson, 23 Mill Creek Road. I think this is a very interesting discussion. To Fred's point about what our fire department is capable of is a very valid one. In terms of the ladder truck and how high up it could get, in terms of what this would do to neighbors' viewscapes if this is allowed to change and you have some of the houses that have been built on Linden Avenue vastly change what Linden Avenue looks like today as compared to what it was with, summer houses, which is a lot of what Branford was back in the day. So there's a real concern, I think, about what this would do and what this would allow people to be able to build, and how it will change this town, and also the impact on neighborhoods. So I appreciate the discussion. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done to do the fact checking, as has been pointed out. Thank you.
Check in, sir. Thank you, Ms. Everson.
The other hand raised is Tony Thompson.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes. Hi. I was unaware that they were considering this thing. I would like to say I designed most of my homes, probably 30 a year, in the FEMA floodplain. And it's been an ongoing wrestling match with the limit in Branford, which, by the way, it used to be 40 feet. I will say that the land use department in Branford is very, very good, and they've managed these questions that have come up. I'll give an example of why this needs to be looked at. So I designed a home back in 2000 that was in a floodplain, and it was under height, the allowable height. So that zone changed to a V zone. So now that's a wave action zone, and it needs to be, so it's a brand new home, basically 2000, needs to be lifted. So if it's lifted the very minimal amount to meet the new requirements, and the insurer is making the owner lift the house, he doesn't want to, but we will. Lifting that house, it will put it over the limit in that zone of 35 feet. It will be closer to 38 or 39 feet to be compliant to the very minimum. We're not gaining any additional habitable space below. This is a requirement. We have to lift the house high enough to put a whole new type of foundation in. It has to be on piers. So there's a regulation in Branford that allows an in-kind lift. In-kind meaning if you're only doing this and keeping the house as it is to meet the standards, you don't need to go for a variance. Now, you had asked earlier how the variance board handles height variances. They do not allow height variances at all. They're very strict. They're very good. So this wrestling match in these flood zones and the wave action zones comes up all the time. I wrestle with it all the time. The town pays very close attention to the standards. John's very good. Jennifer's good. The building officials, very, very good. But I do think one simple correction in these areas, as it used to be, would eliminate about 99% of these wrestling matches, and that is to go back to 40 feet. There are regulations on record with the state building code for habitable space. So you can't just have a third floor the full size of the floors below. It's got to be, I think, 40% of habitable space. So you can't automatically add a whole other floor in the residential building code. There are other precautions in place. Again, I probably have done 15 homes in the last 2 years in Branford alone along the waterfront. And what's going to happen if there isn't a little bit of latitude, and I'm glad that they're entertaining this, is people aren't going to fix houses. They're not going to buy these houses. If they're prohibitive to be repaired, what happens is even the floor joists now for these homes are deeper. They're 16 inches, 18 inches. So the floor levels go up. And there's a big investment. Are we changing the character of the neighborhood? We are. We have no doubt that the houses have to be elevated. Our hands are forced. I'm doing one on Linewood Avenue right now. They bought it for $800,000, and they're spending $1 million replacing that house. They wanted to remodel it. They can't. So, people ask what the other towns do. Milford allows 40 feet. East Haven allows 40 feet. And the wrestling matches for this overall height are greatly diminished. I think that, considering where the flood elevation is, the marker, if you have to be 4 feet above the adjacent ground, 10 feet above, would be, like it mentioned in the first section here. I think that needs to be taken into consideration as well. Because I will say what happens is if people don't get what they are investing in, those houses aren't going to be fixed and they're going to languish. And what would happen in East Haven is some of those languishing cottages detached and surged and smashed into other houses that were improved nearby. So I do think there's a happy median, and I do think going from 35 feet to 40 feet would not change the character too much. It used to be 40 feet. There's a lot of structures around Branford along the water that are at 40 feet. And if there's any real particular exception, I think it would be on a case-by-case review. I will say, and this includes this board, Branford's pretty good. They don't just let people do whatever they want. They scrutinize the plans to every detail. And, you know, we might not like the answers that we get, but they're usually the right answers, and we have to work within the regulations. And again, I think just to put it quickly, I think if they just went to 40 feet like it used to be, 99% of where these issues come up would be eliminated, because it does bog down the process, the average grade calculations, all these other wacky things. It's pretty complex standard that we have in Branford. And I think that might be why it's being proposed, is to kind of reduce the headaches that 35 feet allows. We don't like the fact that we have to push these houses up in the air. It's expensive. They to lift a house that used to sit on the sand, that looked really nice, used to walk in the front door off the beach, well, that's fine. They don't look the same when they're pushed up 10, 12 feet in the air. So I do think that we have to embrace the new standard that the water's rising, and we have to accommodate them in these neighborhoods. Or I think it's going to be a mix of, dilapidated, unimproved cottages and shiny new structures. And I already see that's what happened down in the Sunset Beach area. Some of these houses are going to languish because there's just not enough wiggle room to qualify the investment that it takes to improve those houses properly to the regulations. And then one last thing is, people wonder about the engineering. These structures are fully engineered. In those zones, it's required that they have an engineer stamp on it. So in a V zone or a flood zone, they're engineered from top to bottom, from the anchors in the foundation to the ridge cap. And that's really not a concern. Our structures don't fail. The requirements are just too heavy-handed. And I've never seen a structure fail in the flood zone, ones that were built to current standards. So I think that kind of answers itself. That's it. I know it's a little long-winded, but I do a lot of these, a lot. And if there's a lot at stake, prices are twice as much as what they were, 3 years ago. So I think, we have to entertain the thought that, this raising of the houses is going to happen, whether we like it or not. And I think that the more that we can accommodate good design, and that doesn't necessarily mean taller buildings, but it does mean accommodations for a new set of rules. And I think that's what that comes down to.
Check industry. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Mikhail, is there anyone else from the public?
I see no other hands raised.
Chuck?
Yes.
Chuck, Marcy
Yes.
here.
Marcy.
I thought Tony made some very interesting points and accurate points, but one thing that didn't get mentioned when you raise the houses is there's really more work that needs to be done to transition between the grade that you're arriving at to the first floor. And if we're building too tight to the setbacks, that becomes problematic and changes things. So, that might be something to consider if we're going to a 40-foot height. Maybe we're making sure that we have a setback, maybe a slightly increased setback to allow for the height, or something that can give a little relief to the density of the mass of the structure that is, has to be built to accommodate the flood zone.
Yeah, I'll agree. I like to get the stairs inside if possible, because they are elevated and they're dangerous. And if you can cover them or somehow protect them, or even get them inside, it's certainly a better solution. But that is a good point, that the stairs and the staircases and the landings to accommodate these higher levels do start to creak.
Mark Riccio.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public? We actually have 7 more amendments to get. And we are going to continue this. And people have made some great comments, but if there's no one else from the public, my sense is let's go on to the Second Amendment.
If you wouldn't mind, this is Carla again. I just wanted to say that we actually have not had a storm event to test any of this engineering. We have not had a significant storm event since most of these houses have started to get raised up with Sandy and Irene. So we really haven't tested the theories that we're building on. And, we're very hopeful that they're all going to work and that they're going to work as designed, but there is no actual test of that so far.
That's not true.
Okay, at this point, I want to stop the public comment and we're going to move on. We are continuing the public hearing, but we got a lot of other items in the agenda. So let's move on now to McKeel. Let's go on to the Second Amendment.
Yeah, the Second Amendment pertains to Section 6.8 in our basic standards. This is the grading special exception that many applications are required to get. They're required to get it less about the amount of grading they're doing and more about the location of the grading, being within 100 feet of a wetland or within 25 or within the coastal management area. That is sort of it's basically been something because of how the current Section 6.8 is written. It essentially eliminates all opportunities to try and take into account exclusions that might exist in the coastal management area regulations or exclusions that exist in the inland wetlands regulations, where it doesn't even require permits from those other set of regulations. But somehow how we've written our 6.8 regulation, it's requiring the applicant to essentially have those reviews before Planning and Zoning Commission, as opposed to allowing any of the exclusions that we've written into the section to be, qualified. So the change that I have here is really just adding a simple phrase at the end of the paragraph that talks about exclusions. Right now it says, you can have an exclusion so long as you're not within 100 feet of a wetland and not within the coastal management area. We're looking to change that to sort of clarify if you're within 100 feet of the wetlands or if you're within the coastal management area and you qualify under the exemptions or exclusions from those regulations, then you would qualify for an exemption under 6.8 as well. So hopefully that the train of thought here is really to try and recognize those other exclusions and not to, if those other regulatory bodies like inland wetlands, if they're not going to review this activity because it doesn't rise to the level that requires them to review it, I find it hard that 6.8 should require that review. Happy to answer questions.
Sure. Thank you, McKeel. This is, again, a 6.8. We are, in my experience, we have a lot of sort of stray 6.8 regs that, even though they've been reviewed by the Wetlands Commission, or even sometimes they have to come before us for, it's a grading. 6.8 is the grading earth removal. It's not a regulation of use. It's their earth removal and grading activities. And we have a section that has a whole bunch of exemptions in them. And but there's an exception to the exemptions, and this is going to be an exception to the exemptions. It made sense to me. I may want to look at the phrasing of it, just because once you're talking about an exception to an exception to an exemption, whatever, we can tinker with the language. But in general, I understood what the thoughts were, that if they're exempt from wetlands, then we wouldn't necessarily have to review them here. And then there's also some exemptions under Coastal Area Management Act. So let's start with commission members. Any commission members have any comments about this?
Marcy here. I'm just trying to understand what the exemptions are, and that grading could be fill or cut. And really any activity that's filling or cutting within 100 year would be reviewed by wetlands. So are you saying if it's deemed acceptable wetlands, then we don't need to do the review? Is that the intent of the?
There's a lot of activities that is not being reviewed by wetlands that we're stumbling over and requiring Section 1.8 just because of the distance. There's a lot of activities in people's residential they're doing what is technically grading, but it's really minor. It doesn't exceed the amounts in our exemptions, which is like 5,000 square feet. Yeah, soil disturbance of 5,000 square feet. So in theory, it would qualify for the exemption. Wetlands is not reviewing it, but we have this odd phrasing because of the distance that they don't qualify for that exemption.
Because it's in the upland review, that's what you're saying.
It's in the upland buffer area.
But it's less than 500. Yeah.
Only by fact of where it's located, but the activity by wetlands consideration is not triggering the review.
Yeah, I thought anything within the 100 foot of wetlands had to trigger the review automatically.
There are exemptions, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll have to look it up. I won't drag it on.
It happens a lot with residential properties where people are really doing something in their backyard, and they're not disturbing the entire yard, but they're disturbing a portion within that buffer area. And wetlands has determined they don't need to review it, and we're determining they need a special exception.
Right, like you're trying to plant a tree because it disturbs, and yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the exemptions to a wetlands application are uses incidental to the enjoyment or maintenance of residential property, and except if you're actually disturbing the wetlands themselves. So there's some things.
Yeah. I think I did in the survey I did of the zoning code. It was about a quarter of all special exceptions granted in the past 5 years were section 6.8, many of which were not even reviewed by wetlands.
Other questions, comments from commission members? Hearing none, let's open up the public.
Sharon,
excuse me, Sharon.
Here, yeah. I have a question. Does the way the regulations are currently established, does it act like checks and balances so in other words, if the inland wetland commission doesn't get a chance to evaluate it, then the planning and zoning should. So is there like a checks and balance system going on here, or is it not useful?
I don't think wetlands, at least staff of wetlands, doesn't believe it functions as a checks and balance. They actually find that it sort of functions more of you're not allowing wetlands to regulate the wetlands. You're setting in a separate standard that it's more strict than wetlands agency.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions, comments from commission members? Hearing none, let's see if any member of the public has any comments on this one. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this proposed regulation amendment? You see anyone?
I see no hands raised.
Okay. Okay, then it sounds like let's move on then to the third one. You want to review that one with us, Nikhil?
Sure.
Is there any chance you can enlarge your screen? It's really hard to read.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Thank you.
So this next one deals with
Perfect.
in our regulations, you have a section 9.6.k, and you essentially established that the town planner may do certain reviews if they're considered minor modifications to existing site plan reviews, or and with notification to the commission. What those minor modifications, or what the threshold for a minor modification is, really not delineated. So what I put together is a list of what you've approved in the past, or at least what the town planner has undertaken. And I want to sort of codify what those minor modifications would entail. So and they really come down to like changes in lighting often are an issue, mostly to swap out different components. Minor changes to maybe a layout, shifting a garage from in the driveway from coming in one direction to coming in a different direction. Again, the intent here is to sort of give clarity so that staff are interpreting the regulations correctly.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's right. You already do have the authority. I think what happens is we approve a site plan.
Chuck, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I should stand closer because I'm drifting away.
Thanks.
I think, yeah, we approve a site plan and you get out in the field, you build something, you say, oh, wait a minute, I need to tweak this or that. Do they have to come back to the commission and do a whole site plan modification? No. In our regulations now, we authorize the town planner to approve minor modifications. And what McKeel says, well, let's define what minor is so it's clear. So we know that I'm not overstepping and we know exactly what it is. And so he's delineating that. And that makes some sense. I mean, it's in there now and it makes some sense to clarify that. So I didn't have any problem with this one. Other comments from commission members about this one?
Sharon here.
Sharon.
I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting to the to this phrase, minor changes in building facades and architectural elements. I can remember the discussion that we had about the cinema property, and the original designs that came in for that were really not something that we wanted to see in Branford. And we asked the architects to go back and redo those plans. And a lot of it was the facade and architectural elements. So I'm not sure exactly what we mean by minor.
McKeel, yeah.
Yeah. So the list I have provided that's in the regulation, proposed regulation, is essentially a review of what has been deemed minor and approved. My assumption that it was done so in the past with the approval of the commission. So part of this is transparency. This is how they've been interpreted. I'm new here, so I want to make sure that all these interpretations are correct and that you guys are signing off on them. And two, I think there's an opportunity here to sort of codify that. We've entered into a practice. There's been a sort of a standard. Let's just take this opportunity and make sure that we're clear.
Chuck, Fred Russo. This is to Sharon. Sharon, I do recall what you're talking about, and I think that the difference is that the approval was already given. When we had the conversations about the different changes on the side, that was, I believe, an informational meeting. Nothing had been decided. Nothing was formally presented to the commission. I think the applicant came in with a plan, a potential plan. He said, "What do you think?" And we said, "Nah, this doesn't look very good. Go back and redo it." So that was prior to it coming in as a formal application to the commission. So I think when we made those comments, it wasn't where it had been approved by the commission and then the town planner decided, hey, let's change it. I think what happened was the applicant came before us saying, look, I'm not really sure what you guys are looking for. And when we said we don't like the design, they went back and redesigned it, but nothing had been officially approved through the commission. And they did come back and they came up with a better facade plan than they had originally done. And then it went through. So I think that the difference here is where the changes are made. I think the commission makes has a final word, but if there's a very small modification once the app is been approved, they may change something minor, but it would never be like facade stuff. I recall what you're talking about. There was actually two different examples of that where we stepped in, but we stepped in prior to the application being approved. We were there for more of an informational meeting rather than a formal public hearing. And we gave them our input. They went back, they revised things, and they made it better for, I think, the commission to approve it. But that was my recollection of that thing that you're mentioning.
Okay, well, thanks, Fred. I appreciate the clarification.
Sure.
Marcy here.
Marcy.
I think also, the last line, changes that do not expand the scope of the project or alter it. Things happen during construction all the time where modifications need to be made and they are minor. And if the developers had to come back for every, moving a door and a sidewalk or things, that would get really laden with, time on the town staff and our time, which we could, I think, be better devoted to bigger applications and the course of where we want things to go in the town as opposed to whether the door has been moved 5 feet or something. So,
Thanks, Mercy. Other questions or comments from anyone? Not, let's go ahead and open up to the public. Are there any public comments on this proposed amendment? Yes, Mr. Preddy.
I just had a question, Jim Preddy. The list and the other part of this that Mike Keel, you keep referring to, is that available somewhere to review?
It's in the file. I will get this on our OpenGov system so that you'll have a link on the next agenda so that the public can review it.
Okay. I agree. I don't think the commission needs to be mired down with minor nonsense that happens during construction, like the utility company putting transformer wherever they feel like it, and you have to move a parking space. It doesn't, and that stuff happens all the time. Yeah. So I was just curious of all of these regulations, if they're available to review.
I think Michelle said we have them, but this is just the summary that's the highlighted. You don't have the actual text, and you want to see. And there is a certain amount of question begging because, what a minor change to a building is defined as a minor change to building facades or architectural elements. So defining minor by minor. So whatever. I mean, there's that inevitably happens, but there is enough fleshing out that I thought in specificity, AD access, driveways, things that are more specified when you actually look at the text. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, then why don't we go on to the next amendment? This one's a little more significant.
Yeah. So this is a sort of a entirely new concept that I'm presenting to the commission. So, and it's also an effort, as opposed to reclassifying a bunch of different uses, because I don't think we're there yet, is trying to establish a threshold that site plan reviews could be handled by staff. And the threshold that I've established in the and it's a little different from the previous one, in that the previous one, it would always be after the commission makes the approval. I'm trying to set a threshold by which staff site plan review, which currently is required by the commission to be voted on, to essentially allow certain site plan reviews to be handled by staff. The threshold that I'm looking to or putting out there for discussion is that any structures up to 5,000 square feet, but requiring less than 10 parking spaces. So there's a sort of a two-pronged test there. So if it's 5,000 square feet and requires more than 10 parking spaces, it would go to the commission. If it's less than 5,000 square feet and has less than 10 parking spaces, that would be a minor site plan review that the staff could review. And we're just reviewing it to see if it's compliant to the regulations. Now, also looking at the same threshold for additions, and then the same thing with accessory structures. Again, I'm putting that number out there. That's a threshold that I had in a prior community. Certainly in talking with other people, that I think if you guys are going to consider this, I'm completely on board with figuring out what that Branford version of that threshold looks like. It might be half that. It might be much lower than that. It might be 4 parking spaces. I just like to make sure that we create some threshold that's a mix of square footage, which is density, and then parking, which is sort of a placeholder for intensity. So.
Okay. Yeah, Chuck Anders, Chair. Well, and I see Peter, you have your hand raised. Let's get some comments from commission members, and then we'll hear your comments, Peter.
How does this relate to residential, or is this all commercial uses?
Essentially, any site plan, any review that requires a site plan automatically requires to come to the commission. So it would only be those uses that would require a site plan but do not trigger this threshold would be able to be reviewed by staff.
So most residential uses don't come before the commission. Anything you do to your house, in addition to your house, nothing
Other than accessory apartments.
Yeah, that's
that's special exception. So those will still come to you.
Right. Yeah, and then we have special exceptions for oversized apartments, and special exceptions would come. But
okay,
yes,
I'm just not,
right.
top of mind on what the site plan review.
Yeah, it's typically commercial or industrial uses. It could be a commercial industrial building, either a new building or in addition to a building. That's what I think of it as.
So
if they're doing a small addition.
New tenants in retail spaces that's really what that would, to me, would be a big thing that could be handled, internally.
Right. This is more site work, more building, not just a change of use or switching out a tenant. It's a new building on the property. It's an addition to the building. So that's what I'm assuming, that the paradigm would be you have a retail site or a office building or whatever in the commercial industrial use, because that's where site plans are, and they're doing an addition. I mean, typically they would come before us, and we approve them. I mean, I think I don't think they've been that controversial, but I'm just it is new, and you did it was in Middletown, McKeel, or
that's correct.
Okay.
The other thing I would add, site plan reviews, the commission's only looking at it from the standpoint, is it compliant with the regulations? There's really not much latitude to say, is this a good project or a bad project?
Right. Yeah, site plans are as of right. I mean, you can toy, well, what about the landscaping? I mean, we do get into that a little bit, or the circulation, or the dumpster location, or the lighting. I mean, there's little things, but typically they're as of right. And for the smaller stuff, I don't know how much that is triggered. So it's an interesting concept, and the notion would be, it could potentially be speedier for the public, less costly, and get stuff off our agenda if it's not that big. But it is new. It is definitely new. I'm not, for Branford at least, and I'd be curious of other places besides Middletown that have done it. McKeel, I don't know. What the experience has been.
I would be interested in knowing what types of applications we've seen that this would apply to. Were they for physical additions, or were they additions because of, overhead doors or docks, or things like that nature?
Yeah, I can put together a sample of what that looks like in the past 5 years.
And typically what they do is and this might be, as a landscape architect, something I have a little issue with, things will come before and they pull out the original landscape plan, which is so dated or so so not present on the site. And there's sort of that's really when we come in and try to reevaluate the landscape. And so, if there's enough direction for you to approve that, that it's from a landscape architect or what have you, then I see it being something that could be feasible. But that would be sort of the one opportunity that might be lost if we're not, unless there's just, like, we go back to the landscape rec with better landscape rec.
Thanks, Marcy. Before we open up the public, other commission members have any gut reactions to this?
Sure, Fred Russo. I'm just wondering that I in principle have no problem what is being proposed. I guess the only thing I would ask is it possible for our planner to maybe, as part of his planner's notes at the end of our meeting, at least inform us what came before him where the changes were made. So at least the commission is kept in the loop. The decision will have been made by the planner. I'm okay with that. But just so that we know what those changes were and what projects, if any, there may not be any for a month or two, and there may be a couple in a month, but I think it might be a good practice for just transparency for the commission to know what those changes were. It doesn't have to be a lengthy, report. It would just be application such and such. We did this, and at least we know. So in the event that comes before us in some other form, at least we've been told about it. That would be, I think, it would be a good idea.
I think that would be good.
Thank you.
Thanks. So no, the thing I was possibly wondering is, what about if you ask in advance? Can I handle this administratively? But that may be just another level that we don't want to do. But that's, another thought I had. Other comments or reactions from commission members?
I have a question about Middletown. Are they still doing it, or are they at this point in time? And how long has this been going on?
Yeah, they're still doing it, and the practice is probably was established in the 70s.
Oh, wow. That's a long time ago.
I think one of the reasons to do it is to allow some of these things to not be held up by scheduling. So if Kel has to come in and ask for permission to do the review, they've lost the month. You know what I mean? Or at least the 2 weeks.
Yep.
When he might have been able to just handle it within the week between meetings.
On the surface, for me, it sounds like a decent idea because there are some really minor situations where it puts a strain on the staff. It puts a little bit of a strain on us hearing it, and the applicant. It causes a delay, causes extra cost, and it's all minor. And we're talking just. You're saying you just that they comply with the regulations. You're not making a judgment call. You're saying just making sure that they comply with the regulations, and if they do, then it's an automatic approval because they do comply. So something minor like that, I think, would be a good start to try. Maybe I think it might be a good idea. We have to, think about it a little more, but I think it might be a good idea.
Thanks, Joe. And McKeel, I would, if there are other examples, other towns that do it. Middletown, I think of as a bigger town. I mean, population, just whatever, but, maybe a little bit. I don't know. It's intriguing. Other thoughts, comments from commission members before we open this one up?
Sharon Hutner here. It seems to me that I understand the need for efficiency, and I think it really would be a good idea to lessen the load of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I admire the effort. It just seems to me that 5,000 square feet and 10 parking spaces is large. So if as Mikhail says, this is just a starting point, I would like us to go a little bit smaller with applications that don't come before the planning and zoning. The other thing is I would miss getting to see the landscaping plans. And so I would just put in a preference for maybe still getting to take a look at those. And the other idea is to maybe start a pilot program, maybe do it for 6 months and see how it goes and see what happens, or a year. I don't know, what length of time would be appropriate, but we could do it for a short term and then reevaluate and see how it has worked or not worked. Thank you.
Thanks. Other comments from commission members?
Well, I think we can just look and see what the distribution looks like that Marcy asked for. See how this, how that pans out across the universe of possibilities. and make a decision based on that. My feeling is this and the previous amendment are sort of like the bromide on locks. They keep honest people honest. I don't see them as being something that will deter willful or aberrant action on the part of a future administrator. And there's nothing we can do about that. But as far as increasing the efficiency and the throughput on a routine basis, yeah, I've got no problem with it. We just need to optimize the square footage and the metrics to do this with.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Let's go ahead now and hear any public comment on this. I see a couple of hands raised.
We've got three people who want to comment so far. So
okay, who's first?
I saw Peter Henschel first, and there's two others. So
okay, Peter.
Hi, thanks. Peter Henschel, 285 Thimble Island Road in Branford. Just one, I think this is a great idea to do this and does lead to some efficiencies. But one thing immediately hit me when I was reading this was that it would seem logical if you do establish a threshold to also allow the applicant, if they so desired, to go in front of the commission. I can see there might be a possibility where they, since there is certainly some discretion involved in either review by staff or review by the commission, that they might rather have the commission review their proposal. So it would seem to me that if you put that in as an allowance, that if they so wished, they could have it heard in front of the commission, that would be a add to the amendment. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Peter. Who's next, McKeel?
Lauren Brown.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Lauren Brown, and I'll admit I don't really understand the details of all of this or the implications and as I said, the details, but I do have a little bit of a concern about transparency in terms of public involvement. And the reason I'm thinking about this is an application that came in, I think even before COVID, so several of you will remember, for 250 North Main Street. It was for a special exception. That's the property across from the U-Haul, now next to Clancy's. And a significant tree was taken down in the course of that work. And there were several of us that were concerned about that. And we were and so that would have triggered the requirement for more extensive plantings, if I remember correctly. But we were told that that requirement couldn't be implemented until the owners came in for site plan review, which as far as I know hasn't happened yet. But my point is, if it goes right to the staff, there's no way that the public would ever know and have any chance to comment on it. Whereas if it's, if it's to the commission, we get the notices beforehand.
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, that was a case where there was an approval for a shopping center, which and on the main street, it was for some retail buildings. They did a lot of gravel operation, and it's for sale now. And there was a significant tree in the front of the site that my recollection was it was taken down as part of the process. We did require that it be restored, and it never was. But then I think the thought was that they're not going to be able to occupy the site until they do, and they haven't tried to occupy it. They haven't sought a CO, but right now it's up for sale again. But presumably, before the site can be occupied, there will need to be. I think it's in the conditions of approval that it needs to be done before the place can be occupied. But yeah, I don't see that scenario. I suppose that would be a tree. I guess that could happen anywhere. A tree could be, a significant tree can be removed, and the question was, did they do it illegally in an administrative? I guess that's just something staff would need to be aware of. If there's other site problems going on, they come in for a 5,000 square foot addition, but they've got other issues where they're in violation. What do you do with that? So, yeah.
I mean, My experience is always, I mean, that particular project, I remember it is they were sort of trying to set up pad sites to be able to sell to some other commercial operation, and they, based on market conditions, it's never happened. But that incident with the tree really did a lot because of public input to, get the town and everybody thinking about the regulations and how they need to be applied, and, you know, what are, what they should be. And I think that's, at least something productive that's coming out from it. But to let Lauren's point, is there anything in a minor site plan review relating to the landscape of, trees coming down that, they get they've gotten the approval, and, they get into construction, and, they have to move something over and it affects a tree, is that something that would become under the purview of the town? Or, obviously the public has a large interest in large trees. And, I don't know if there's ways to caveat aspects of the modifications for things that are hot buttons in the town.
I think we're climbing two concepts together here. Approval and enforcement. The aspect of the text amendment is for approval. Enforcement is an entirely different matter. And the enforcement would have to be enforcement regardless of what the approval process is. So if what was approved did not include taking down the tree, and the tree was taken down, that's an enforcement matter, and that comes back to us at some point for an opinion.
I think would be if the modification required the taking down of a tree after the approval is my point. Not, not a construction accident around a tree or a blatant removal of a tree, but, using the regulation to get the tree down by coming back later in a second, because it's under the threshold. That sounds very paranoid, but, the concern is, are there situations where trees may be impacted for, when minor projects are being, minor additions are being added onto a building? I don't know that we've seen that.
Yeah. The issue around any minor addition is, to what extent do we require that they bring the whole site into conformance? And the examples that we've seen is that you're doing something little on the site. The issues where it's come in the past is sidewalks. Remember, someone was going to do a minor revision. We're trying to get sidewalks all around Route 1. If they're doing a whole new project, no problem. But if they're doing something little, we were always a little hesitant to overload them. Sidewalks would be an example, but landscaping would be another. What if they, how much do they have to bring the site into conformance with the current landscaping regulations if they're doing something minor? Or have they complied with the existing, did they do what they said they would do for the existing site plan? And then the third one will be lighting, where we typically always do it. We say, sure, you got to fix your lighting up if they're doing just a minor thing. So those, in my mind, those kind of, it's not as straightforward to say, oh yeah, there's an addition, it complies with the regs, we don't need to waste our time. You kind of get into these a little more discretionary areas. Well, what about other parts of the site, because they're doing site improvements that they need to bring up, and because the regulations are phrased flexibly. We said, to the extent practical, you can bring the site in conformance. What's that mean? And we kind of fudge that. I mean, that's, we kind of waffle on that. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like to give, on the one hand, I want to authorize, give stuff to the staff, but I want to make sure they know the policy too, what they do about that. So I don't know.
All right, we have one more hand raised. I know we have to still get to landscaping.
Right.
So, Tracy Evans has her hand raised.
Tracy.
Hi, thank you. My concern is, the definition of minor. What the town planner may consider minor could be something major for someone who is bordering a site And moving a driveway or a door or a sidewalk or a tree could have a major impact. And I think the Planning and Zoning Commission exists as a public review and documentation as to what is happening in town and what is being asked of the town in terms of site and site development. So I think allowing the discretion of the town planner removes a public element that exists by having meetings like this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who want to speak?
I see no other hands raised.
Okay. Well, then, with that case, let's move on to item number, going back to our agenda, which is around here. Item number 3, our agenda, that's the landscaping regulation. So why don't we go ahead and get started with that one?
Yeah, so we did receive a number of comments. So I'll be brief so that we can get the public's reaction. Again, same approach here. This is the first opportunity to get this out in front of the commission. You guys have seen variations of it. Members, stakeholders in the community have seen it, but we're really looking to get feedback tonight and take that information and see how we can move this proposal to something that works for the community. This does come out of a lengthy, I guess, multi-year process. When I came on board, people asked me to take a look at this and put my sort of 2 cents and my version into the ring. So that's what I'm doing. Happy to take any hits as a result. But what I discovered in conversations is that there's really 4 elements that I'm trying to achieve here. The first and foremost is to sort of limit unnecessary clearing. I'm going to set up sort of a buffer around which construction may have the site cleared, but really the intent is not to have the entire lot cleared, especially if it has no relation to the construction. The other is that we establish, thresholds for one-for-one replacement for trees up to a maximum amount of 30 trees per acre. And then also to require the replacement with native trees and plantings, and also require in areas that are disturbed that any natives or any invasives be removed. Beyond that, I am really looking to sort of understand how this can more fully reflect sort of the values that we want in the community and create that balance of providing clear guidelines so that property owners, developers can sort of meet or exceed the landscaping requirements that we put on the books. And with that, I'll hand it over to the chair.
Thank you, McKeel. I'll try to run through these. I reviewed, we had a lot of public comment on this. I'll try to summarize quickly what I thought. One, I like the idea, the limits of clearing, the idea that, one way of simply trying to preserve the landscaping that's on there by limiting what you can just take away. And you did it by sort of imposing separation distances on buildings and driveways and things like that. And it seemed interesting and good. But then I think it was Peter that made the comment, well, sometimes sites need to be graded. You need to, and you may have to remove a lot more trees, just for the grading element, even if it's more than 50 feet from the building and so forth. So that was a interesting point. And, so you would have to do some restoration and whatever. I know the prior draft said 75% native, and this one is 100% native. I totally defer to what is appropriate, but I seem to recall sometimes Marcy saying, or other suggestions that sometimes, well, maybe even though it's not native, it's appropriate. And would we be throwing that out? That would not be allowed here. So would there be any flexibility? And then the kind of third point that the concern I had, and we tried to build in the last one, is applying this to residential uses, particularly residential accessory uses, because whether it be accessory apartments, oversized garages, or things like that, it's basically a residence. And yet, do they have to put, front landscape streetscape stuff in your landscape, that kind of strikes me as incorrect. So I would hope there'd be an exemption for appropriate residential uses so that it would not, they would not be subject to this. So those were my quick comments. Others from the commission have comments before we turn it over to get public comments.
Sure. I had a list of comments and I read remarks by Peter and Shirley this afternoon, an email that sort of like undercut just about everything I was going to say. So I will let those comments ride with Peter and Shirley. My observation that wasn't covered there though is that in the purpose statement, I think it's stated backwards. The purpose of the landscaping regulations is to improve the quality of the environment and aesthetic appearance of Branford, and enhance the ecological integrity of systems, promote public health, and thereby enhancing property values. And there's a hierarchy that just got all scrambled in that purpose. And to start off with enhanced property values seems like the wrong way to do it. Editorially, yeah, I totally agree on the maximum limit of disturbance that is really subject to particulars of the site plan, the logistics plan. With some of these, I cannot understand how you could effectively operate safe trenching or spoils handling in terms of making a trench or, just normal work on site. I think this is kind of arbitrary, and I don't think we need it, frankly. And aside from a disturbing lack of articles in the general text, I would note that there's the reference of 6.3C6 to itself is a little uncomfortable. But like I said, there's the substantive comments that come from Peter and Shirley. I was just happy to see them, and they took away most of the wind from my bluster.
Thanks, Jim. Any comments from commission members before we open up to the public?
Marcy here.
Marcy.
Thank you, Chuck, for remembering my comments about native trees. I think, everyone can attest that I'm always encouraging native trees, but to, tie the applicants to 100% native is, I'm very, very opposed to that. I do appreciate Peter's comments about using the landscape architect, even though, engineers can submit plans, and by statute, I went through a whole statute list when we were doing the landscape regs about, the different areas. It's really something that needs to come from somebody who specializes in the field, and I would trust them to determine where natives are appropriate. When you're buffering and anything to the perimeter of the site, I love the idea of natives. But sometimes you have situations where you're dealing with street trees, and it's very difficult to match the habit and growth of a tree to the circumstances. So, I really think that we shouldn't be tying that down to that great of extent. But, I don't want to discourage the use of it. I just think that it's too harsh. And to say 50%, 75%, again, if it's a good plan, every plan's going to have a different interpretation.